All right, hopefully you had a chance to do the 10 problems here for warm-up. I'm going to go over them very quickly. So if you haven't had a chance, pause it, get it done. Number 1, simplify the expression. Zoom in it. Let's see what makes sense. Okay, so we need to factor out a greatest common factor from the denominator. That happens to be 2x squared, which then simplifies in the numerator, and we end 1 over 2x minus 5. We were not asked to state the excluded values, but it would be x cannot equal 5/2. Number 2, greatest common factor in the numerator. Factor out a negative from the denominator, then factor the trinomial. X minus 4 simplifies, negative 3x over x plus 2. Number 3, factor out the greatest common factor, and in the denominator you actually have x squared plus 1 times x squared minus 1. That's a difference of squares. So you could factor the x squared minus 1, but it does actually simplify. And make sure you don't just bring the numerator on up. And again, you could factor and then cancel, but it's easier just to simplify here. You end up with 4 over x squared plus 1, and that is it. Number 4, factor out the GCF, 5x, from the numerator. The denominator is a difference of squares. 5x minus 6 simplifies, 5x over 5x plus 6. Put it in parentheses if needed. Number 5, factor out the greatest common factor from the numerator first. That's a 4. Take out a 2 from the denominator. Then factor the trinomial in the numerator separately from the denominator. X minus 4, x minus 1, x plus 5, x minus 1. The x minus 1 simplify, and 4 divides by 2, that's 2. You end up with 2 quantity x minus 4 divided by the quantity x plus 5. Number 6, that is actually a perfect square. Factors into 2x plus 1 times itself. And in the denominator you have a GCF of 2x. The 2x plus 1s simplify, and you end up with 2x plus 1 over 2x. Number 7 on the back, now stating the excluded values. That means look at the LCD, say what it cannot equal, and there was a space for it down here, so LCD is going to be x2 times minus 3, which means you have to multiply the first fraction by x minus 3 over itself, the second fraction by x plus 2 over itself, and you are adding, so combine into the LCD, multiply, and then add up your like terms. What you should have gotten is 2x squared minus x minus 5 all over x plus 2 quantity x minus 3, excluding 3 and negative 2. Number 8, again, you should have done this already. I'll post the key on Canvas so you can look at it later. This is quick. First denominator factors into 2x, quantity 2x plus 1. The LCD then is 2x times the quantity 2x plus 1. X cannot equal 0 or negative 1/2. Build your LCD, multiply the second fraction by 2x plus 1 over itself, subtract that second numerator, and you end up with a simplification, negative 1 over 2x plus 1. Number 9, your LCD is x minus 4 times x plus 3. The second fraction needs to be multiplied by x plus 3 over itself. Distribute, combine like terms in the numerator, x squared plus 5x plus 1 over your LCD, x plus 3, x minus 4, nothing simplifies. Excluded values are negative 3 and 4. And number 10, the LCD, factor a negative out of that middle fraction, change that to a positive. We looked at that last class during the notes. And your LCD then is a lot easier. It's x plus 1 times x minus 1, which means you have to multiply the first fraction by x minus 1 over itself, second fraction by x plus 1 over x plus 1, and I actually combined this since it's a same fraction. It becomes 2x plus x, which is 3x minus 2. Just a little trick, combine that there. Distribute here, get all these terms, add them up. 4x squared plus 2x minus 4 over your LCD, which you could factor 2 out of, but it doesn't allow you to factor else further, so you could just leave it here, it doesn't matter. The excluded values are positive and -1. Again, if any portion of that, you are welcome to check on Canvas for the key later. All right, today the topic of the next section is multiplying and dividing rationals. When you are multiplying, you just multiply across the numerator and across the denominator. So you multiply straight across. And if you are going to divide, you need to first multiply by the reciprocal, which we a lot of times refer to as flip and multiply. Okay. You will still need to factor. We're working with expressions, no equal sign. You still want to state the excluded values and simplify before you multiply things out. Otherwise, you end up with, you know, all kinds of crazy cubic and quartic equations. So we're going to start off easy with just some numbers here. It says find the products and any excluded values. That's at any point, not just final answers. The first few problems here, a couple problems rather, don't have any variables, so nothing to exclude. What we are going to look at is factoring if possible. I'm going to start with the bigger numbers. So 27 is 9 times 3, for example, and obviously you could factor the 9, but it's going to simplify with this 9 over here. 28, let's see, that divides by 7. It's 7 times 4. And 4 could be factored, but 8 over here in the numerator could be factored into 4 times 2. And then what you want to do is cancel anything, or you could continue factoring. The 9 here factors, simplifies, the 4 simplifies, and that becomes 6 over 7. Okay. All right, nothing to exclude. You try number 2. Pause it if needed, and then we'll come back. All right, what you should have found is that 32 is 8 times 4. 24, well, it's -1 times 6 times 4. And 39 is 3 times 13. So these 3 simplify. Make sure 1-for-1 situation here. These 4s simplify. And let's see, the 6 and the 8 could simplify, so this is 2 times 3, this is 2 times 4, so sometimes you have to continue simplifying. That cancels, this is just the problem number, so ignore that. And you should end up with a -3 over 4 times 13, and let's just go ahead and multiply that out. That is -3 over 40 plus 12 is 52. Hopefully you got that as an answer. All right, number 3, we are going to look at factoring here. 98, let's see, that is actually 7 times 14. So the 14 simplify, that's nice. 15 and 35 both divide by 5, so that's 3 times 5. This is 5 times 7, and the 5s cancel. And then you have an x here and an x squared here, so the x squared is gone and x is gone from here. So let's see where we're at now. We may need to continue on a little bit. We have a 7, a 3, and an x, don't lose that, and another 7, and so these 7s simplify, and we have 1 over 3x. We were supposed to state what the excluded values were, so x cannot equal 0, and that goes from the beginning as well. For number 4, let's start there. X cannot equal -1 or +2. All right, now see if you can simplify anything. And let's see what you came up with. Hopefully you crossed off this x minus 2, this x minus 2. 4 divides by 2, that's 2, or I guess you could factor. And the x plus 1 and the x minus 1 actually don't simplify. So 2 times 3 is 6. You have x minus 1. Don't multiply it out. X plus 1 denominator. Nothing left to do. Moving on. All right, on the next page, number 5. We have a GCF in the numerator here, trinomial here, just x cubed there. So let's put parentheses around things. And then we need to factor. This is a multiplication, so we don't need to flip and multiply or anything like that yet. Let's go step by step. So we're building the first fraction. We can factor out at x squared. We get x plus 3 left over. Put everything in parentheses, that's helpful. And then in the denominator, that is easy-ish quadratic, because it's just x times x makes x squared. We have plus 3 minus 1. And before we get too excited and cross things off, let's continue factoring and state our excluded values. This is a perfect square trinomial. It's x minus 1 times x minus 1, and we have x cubed in the denominator. I'm going to call that x squared times x because of that other x squared. So x cannot equal 0, 1, or negative 3. That has to be excluded. And now it's a cancel party. Those guys cross off, those cross off, this and the other x squared, and you end up with x minus 1 over x, which there's nothing else you could do there. All right, number 6. Let's take a look at that. Has to be factored. We're going to factor out a GCF. Let's start here. 3x, we get 1 minus 9x squared, which is actually a difference of squares, so we're going to have to continue factoring there. In the denominator, that can be factored. That's 3x times x, and we have negative 1, but negative 2 in the middle, so if we put the negative 1 here and the positive 1 here, that makes a negative 3x plus x makes negative 2x. Again, a multiplication. And we have a quadratic, so let's see if it factors. It's 3x squared, so that's 3x times x. Let's see, that's negative 4. So negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1, and that'll add up to negative 4x. And then we have 3x here. So what's next? Well, we could simplify some things, but let's first look at our excluded values. We have to exclude 0 right here. We have to exclude positive 1 and negative 1/3. And then may as well cross off some things that, you know, can get simplified. The 3x plus 1 and minus 1 cannot be simplified. So let's see what we can factor here. That's a difference of squares. That's actually 1 plus 3x times 1 minus 3x. And then this is basically like one big fraction, so we still have the 3x minus 1 and the 3x plus 1 from here. All right, so let's see where we're at. Oh, sorry, this was plus minus from the difference of squares. 1 plus 3x and 3x plus 1 are actually the same thing. The order's just reversed. You could rewrite this. It's the same thing. And then what we end up with are 1 minus 3x, 3x minus 1. Those are actually equal but opposite, so we should factor a negative 1 out of this. That would be negative positive 3x minus 1. We'll combine it with this 3x minus 1, so now it would be 3x minus 1 quantity squared. Okay. All right. Last two problems are division. So we need to multiply by the reciprocal. It says flip it and multiply. That's kind of the short. So let's see what that looks like. In the numerator here, we'll factor and all that, but we're going to take this, we're going to change it to multiply, and we're going to write x squared minus 4 over x minus 3. So these each need to be factored. And of course, we can factor here along the way as well. So what do we have? We have x times x 2 times 3 is 6, adds up to 5 if they are both negative. Okay. And now we will factor the x squared minus 4. It's a difference of squares, so I'm just going to write it next to it. X plus 2, x minus 2. And that's basically like one big fraction. So what do we need to exclude? We need to exclude positive 3, negative 2. And that means that we can simplify now. This x minus 3 cancels. The x plus 2 cancels, and we actually end up with x minus 2 times x minus 2 twice makes x minus 2 quantity squared. Okay. All right, last problem. Let's flip and multiply. When we flip, let's go ahead and factor. So from the numerator here, which turns into the denominator, we can factor out an x. We get 2x plus 3. Over here, this is a perfect square trinomial, x minus 3 times x minus 3. Now we are multiplying. There was a x minus 3 here. We don't flip the first fraction, that stays. We have a difference of squares in the numerator. And let's see if anything cancels. But before that, actually, we should do our excluded values. We have to exclude 0, 3, and negative 3 halves. So we cross this off, x minus 3 and 2x plus 3. Nothing else to simplify, so we end up with 2x minus 3. Quantity times x minus 3 all over x. And we are done. There is homework out of the book. Make sure that you do it. Correct your answers using the back of the book. And make sure all your homework is done for the next homework check.